Hello and welcome to Meet the Designer series on pattern review. I am Deepika, founder of Pattern Review, and we have with us today Pamela from Pamela's Patterns. And welcome, Pamela. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming. I appreciate your time so much. To all those who are watching, if you haven't seen this series before on our YouTube channel, this is my effort in bringing into focus some of the independent pattern designers and the stories behind their company. I always feel that um, there's so much more to a pattern than just what's in the envelope. The designer's ethos, their purpose, their philosophy, and a lot of their design aesthetics and things. I always say their why of their starting this company. So I thought it might be kind of fun to interview some of the designers behind the pattern brands we carry. If you're not aware, we carry over 75 different pattern brands on Pattern Review. I'll include all the links below in the description box. And you can find these patterns here on Pattern Review or on pamelasPatterns.com. I'll include all of those links and some more information. So be sure to click the description box below. Also, if you're liking these videos and if you prefer, what was I saying? If you like these videos, please give us a thumbs up. This is always awkward to say, but it's important. And subscribe if you want. It really helps us out and it keeps us motivated to do more of these. So join us with a beverage or maybe a sewing project, a pattern tracing project. And I hope you enjoy this interview. So welcome, Pamela. I'm going to go right in and
Okay.
ask you the why of your company. Why did you start Pamela's Patterns? And from what I remember, you started uh, sewing or your company in the 80s. Is that true? Or you've been sewing since then?
I've been sewing since I was very young, because I came from a long line of what would now be called makers. My mother, my grandmothers, my father, like everybody made things. So that was kind of natural to me. And then my parents were also business owners, so we grew up, helping them build the business and so forth. So between being a maker and learning how to run a business, it was kind of inevitable for me to own my own business. But when I
We share
started,
that in common. My
yeah,
dad also has his own foundry, so I come, and that's one thing I actually never wanted to do because I'd seen the struggle, I'd seen the hard work, and I'm like, I'm just gonna get a 9 to 5 job. And I did for probably I guess 7, 8 years until I started pattern review. So who knows, right?
I
It's so
know.
it's so
It's
interesting
like
to know that about you.
ingrained in you. It's like you grow up with these things, and the desire to make things, and then the desire to be my own boss. And it didn't start off that way per se. I started teaching in the 80s. That's when I started actually teaching, and I worked for a sewing machine dealer called Manchester Sewing. And the cool thing about that was, even though I worked for this man Aaron, who had this amazing company, he let me run it like it was my own company. So even though it technically wasn't my business, I ran it like it was my business, and he funded everything that I wanted to do. So we were able to, between the two of us, and then of course a talented group of instructors and so forth that we were able to hire, including many people that you have on your platform,
Oh,
Gail Yellen
wonderful.
from Gail Patrice Designs and Jennifer Stern from J Stern Designs. They all worked with us as well. And so it was, kind of like running my own business, even though I didn't have to take care of that part of it. So the reason that my pattern company started was because I was so interested in getting things to fit people, that if I was teaching a class, say, I'm just going to, because this is kind of what started it for me, say I'm teaching a t-shirt class, I would be using a pattern from somebody's company, and then I would have to spend like one entire class making sure that the t-shirt fit the person the way that I felt it should fit. I didn't want them to make something and not have it fit. So that took up quite a bit of time. And then the next classes would be in actually making the t-shirt. I got hired to teach for a conference and they wanted me to teach a t-shirt in a day. And I was so overcome with like, well, how am I going to do this if I don't know if the t-shirt is going to fit them? And that's
Right,
not enough
because if
time.
it's a day, you're losing that day of fitting, which you
Yeah.
would, yeah, okay.
But
That makes sense.
by this time I was a Palmer Pledge educator and had learned about tissue fitting, and I was starting to see the most common issues that, a modern figure woman would have to deal with when they're working with a commercial pattern that's based on a set of standards that are not really realistic to what, modern women look like today. So I took those 7 things that I found always seemed to be changed in some way or another. It might be a half an inch or 5/8 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch, and just kind of took the average of that, put those adjustments into a pattern, and it worked out so well that I decided to, see if people wanted to buy it, and they did.
Oh,
And that's
yay!
that's pretty much what started the whole thing, was just that desire to have some basic simple patterns, simple patterns, beautiful fabric that would fit people better right out of the envelope. And I think I've done a pretty good job of doing that over the years. And of course, I was actually self-taught, so it just keeps getting better and better because you're always learning.
Yeah, I always feel that way. Learning never really stops. And actually, your a perfect t-shirt pattern is one of our best-selling patterns on Pattern Review. Not sure if it's the same for you.
Yes.
Um, but like even on the forums, people rave about your patterns, and I think there's so much value to having a core set of well-fitting patterns, which you can then use to add more design details, right?
What Yes, it's so much fun, and they become jumping off points as well uh for doing design changes. So one of my most popular classes that I teach is I call it pattern hacking or pattern design, where you use just your favorite pattern, which I hope is, mine, from Pamela's patterns. But I mean, that's what I'll usually teach from, and then show them how to make different designs, within that pattern, having that pattern become like your sloper to
Right,
then
right.
design from.
Awesome. So that was then, and let's talk about now, 2024. What is motivating for you right now to still continue to run Pamela's patterns? Is your focus more on patterns, uh, designing more patterns, or has it shifted towards educating more, or was it always teaching?
So I think that for me, making the patterns was just a great way for me to be able to teach more. And so as a national educator, and I wasn't a national educator when I started. I was educating some, but not like on that scale. Um, because most of the national educators had a product to sell. They had a book
True.
or they had a pattern or they had something. And so when I started my pattern company, it was kind of like my foot into the door to become a national educator. And that's what I really love the most. I've always loved the teaching part the most, connecting with people and seeing them get a good fit or learn new techniques. I so that I think probably has not changed all that much. I still really love the teaching part, and whether it's in person or virtual, we've conquered that through, the shutdown and everything.
Right.
So I found a whole new love of that, which I never thought would happen. And so I still think that that's my main focus, but I do find that the more I design, the more I have that desire as well. I have way more ideas than I have time to accomplish. Um, and with running a small business, you I don't know, like I find I have to be very diversified to actually be able to make a living from it. You know, I have a studio that has to be supported and employees and,
That's
you
right.
know,
That's
things
right.
like that. So, you know, I have to, you know, have a certain amount of income coming in. So I try and be diversified with, I have the patterns and then I have lots of curated notions. I also started many years ago developing notions. So I have several products, Notion type products, sewing Notion products that I sell that I have designed and developed. Mostly my manufacturing is done through other woman-based companies in the United States uh, that actually have similar products, and then I'll approach them and say, "Hey, would you make this product for me?" And they agree. I do have
How
one
wonderful.
overseas
I did not
company.
know that.
Yeah, yeah. And so now it's like trying to divide my time up between making a new pattern or, oh, I have this great idea for this new product that needs to be developed, you know. It's been so interesting to, you know, develop a product as well. And I've really enjoyed that. I think I must just be somewhat of an inventor at heart, you know, where
I like
whether
that.
it's
I like that.
clothing or, you know, I
Yeah.
like to, you know, I like to do
But you know
construction.
what I like about you is that ideas are a dime in a dozen, right? So many people have ideas, but executing those ideas in a way which is successful is another thing. So the
Hmm.
fact that you're able to do that, and I like what you said about diversifying. And I was at my local coffee shop this morning and I saw the little sticker on a boutique right next to it. When you buy from a small business, an actual person does a dance. And it's so true. Every time
Yeah.
we get orders on pattern review, Laura and I are like, yay! It's actually true because small business owners put so much of themselves, and it's it's really, I mean, to all those who are watching, anytime you buy patterns, take classes on pattern review or Pamela's patterns, you should know that we appreciate you so much. And
I know.
it's
It's
really
so true. Like I'll have a class at my studio and then before they leave, they're like, I sell fabric in my studio and all my notions and they'll be like milling around my market room and buying stuff, and when they leave I just have this like, oh, thank you.
I know, I
Thank
know.
you
It's
so
actually true.
much.
It's not just so whoever created that quote
Yeah.
is it's true. Um, so let's talk about your own personal sewing. And
Uh-huh.
do you not primarily use your own patterns for your sewing for yourself, for your family, or do you use other designers' patterns as well?
I guess I do more of my own because I'm always trying to do more samples, you know.
True.
You know, my wardrobe when I'm teaching is always my patterns that I'm wearing. I mean, occasionally I'll throw something else in. I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's mostly like to showcase because of course I want people to be inspired by the patterns that I've made and, you know, buy them and use them and so forth. So when I'm teaching, my entire wardrobe is mostly my patterns. Of course, I'm hacking them, redesigning them all the time and so forth. So I definitely do my own. I do get so inspired by looking at, you know, all my peers and their designs that they do. I'm always looking at, you know, what they're coming up with and designing and going, oh, I love that. I love that. Um, but I don't have enough time, I guess, to
Exactly.
do a
Only
lot of
a finite number
theirs.
of hours, right?
However, I do teach a lot of open sew classes and I teach for workroom social a lot. And the people that come to those classes, they're not just doing my patterns, they're doing
True.
everybody else's patterns and almost all indie patterns, which is really nice. and then I'm able to see what the patterns look like and how they go together and how they fit people. And so I get to experience
Other
my
designers as well.
friends who have
Yeah.
indie pattern companies without actually making them. And so I feel like I kind of have a little bit of the best of both worlds. When I do something for myself, I tend to do a lot more of vintage kind of things. So I love vintage patterns. I love vintage type fabrics that remind me of vintage clothing. So a lot of times when I do something else, it will be something along those lines that I'll be wearing with whatever I've made from my pattern line. So I like to kind of combine it that way.
Oh, that sounds like a win-win because,
Yeah,
you fill some holes with vintage patterns and then the whole outfit is yours. And
yeah.
I've actually there I wanted to do you have any data to share with us? What are some of your best-selling patterns? And I can talk about the ones on pattern review. Do you
Yeah, my very best-selling pattern has been and probably always will be the perfect t-shirt. That was I think it was my second pattern that I ever made. Um, I learned so much doing it, but very little has actually changed about the core pattern since I first made it, which is unbelievable. And of course, when I started my pattern company in 2005, I had no idea that it would be a pattern company. Didn't have any even thoughts about longevity of a pattern or anything. And I'd have to say that I have not discontinued any of my patterns.
see? That's another thing I like about
Yeah,
indie patterns. Most of the patterns are still there.
yeah,
And so it's people don't feel like, oh my God, I'm left in the lurch. Where is my
yeah.
pattern? Just when I figured out everything about it.
I know it's amazing. And just here's an example that I think is kind of fun. I did my bias, it's called Pamela's favorite bias skirt. And that pattern I think I did in 2007 maybe. And it was one of my early patterns for sure. And it was very popular then. And then it kind of died out, and I was like, oh, maybe I should just continue it. And then all of a sudden it was popular again. And then it kind of died out. And then now, oh my gosh, like everything you see from Old Navy to Neiman Marcus
Yeah,
is
bias is
this
back.
bias slip skirt,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, back again, but it's all new fabrications. So now
Yeah.
I've made like four more new ones just in the last couple of months that are of like a silkier fabric, more like what you're seeing in the current styles. And I'm like, wow, it's back. I'm glad I didn't discontinue.
I know. I bias is a little bit tricky. Um it goes through waves, I feel.
Yeah,
Even though it is pretty much magic.
yeah,
Speaking of magic, I was introduced to your patterns um through a review. Somebody wrote on pattern review about the magic pencil skirt. So if this was before we carried your patterns and I bought your pattern, I made the magic pencil skirt. Oh my goodness. It's like the finish on top with the elastic, and every time I used it doesn't fit me anymore, which means I need to make another one in the size which fits me now. But I still have that skirt because I used to
yeah,
get so many compliments. There's something about the fit. And I believe you're one of the OG designers who included YouTube video in your
yeah.
patterns. So each of your patterns come with a YouTube video. Is that true? Or
Not every single one, but most of them do. And there's some now that some of my patterns now, the instructions are strictly visual. So they are strictly by video. Um, and then there's somewhere it's an addition, there's somewhere they're full length, there's somewhere there's like just little snippets of parts of the design that might be easier to see. But when I you're gonna love this. I don't even know if any of you will remember, but like when I started on YouTube, there was a 10-minute time limit.
I remember that.
Yeah, so you could only do a 10-minute video. I had absolutely no experience whatsoever with any kind of camera work at all. And so I bought this little camera. It was called a flip camera.
I had the flip.
You
I had
did?
the flip and I loved it so much.
Yes.
I love technology. So I'm always the early,
Yeah.
adapter of all things tech. I love the flip
I
camera.
actually did my first videos, which are still on YouTube, with the flip camera, putting in my own, I think they had like a little graphics thing that you could put in. And still some of my older videos, it'll be like in 3 parts, which I keep thinking I need to go back in and like redo them and combine them. But like I think one of my other best-selling patterns is the versatile twin set. And I think
Yes.
there are 3 total videos for that one because they had to be done in 10-minute segments.
Oh,
So
how
I did,
fun.
okay, here's this part, and here's this part, and here's this part. That's how long I've been doing it. And I don't
No, I
remember
don't think,
anybody doing it at that
not
time.
at that time. I think,
Yeah.
in fact, when we started carrying your patterns, I saw that YouTube icon on your patterns, and I'm like, this is really cool because now we have a lot more video content
Yeah.
with patterns, and I think it's pretty smart that you were the OG, you know.
I
So
never thought of it that way. That's so cool.
yes,
You're
it
special.
is. um, okay. So are you, for the newer patterns, are you still, I'm guessing you're still making the videos for
Yeah.
instruction? Like you said, some of them have videos, some of them have written instructions. So I love that because we're all, we all learn differently. And this is why on Pattern we offer different types of classes as well. So,
Yeah.
some people like live learning, others like self-paced learning. There are people who only like just PDFs. So I like that your patterns are very similar, that you can use text-based instructions or you can watch a video.
Yeah.
But I love that. Let's talk a little bit about the pandemic and the impact it had on Pamela's patterns. So, how did you feel and how was it for you?
Well, like everybody else, if you're self-employed, when it first happened, it was just like this panic set in. What are you going to do? And was I going to be able to keep my studio? Was I going to be able to pay my rent? You know, um, it was super scary. And I think I was probably like one of the first people on the East Coast to get COVID because I'd been traveling in Seattle when it hit. And then I went to New York and taught. And so it was inevitable that I got it. And it was just a very scary time, but I'll never forget. It was March 26th and I'm on my email and somebody emails me. It was one of my customers. I teach for her store up near Rochester, New York. And she emailed and said, "Hey, how much Fantastic Elastic do you have? Because everybody's trying to make masks.
Yeah,
It just started, like it was just that week that people were like, oh, we could make masks. And we're out of all of our elastic. How much do you have? Because with Fantastic Elastic, I sell it 1.5 inches wide, and you can cut it down
you can
to
cut
a
it,
quarter
right?
inch wide. And I said, well, I'm really well stocked actually, because I was supposed to go to this show. And so I had stocked everything up. And she said, "Oh, well, I'll take, 100 of white and 100 of black." And,
Oh, wow.
and I was like, okay. So I got out of bed because everybody was like, what do we do with ourselves? We stay in bed and watch TikTok or something. Um, and so I got myself to the studio and started shipping, and it was like wildfire, honestly. I pretty much lived at my studio. Of course, I had no employees. The post office was open. And so I shipped elastic night and day. I mean, it was unbelievable. The company that I get my elastic from was in New York, and I always thought this was a fun story because the hardest part of me working with them was a language barrier. So there was one salesperson that I could communicate. Now, we didn't speak the same language, but he knew what I needed,
Oh,
and I had to
wow.
just say it, and he knew what to do. He knew where to send it. He knew all of this. And if he wasn't there, I didn't even ever try and order. I would wait for him to come back. Well, of course, he's not there. I'm in a panic. Nobody's answering. So I thought I'm going to just send an email. And I get the owner, and she speaks perfect English because that's all I speak. And we started communicating, and it would be like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd be emailing her going, do you have any more elastic in your warehouse? I need more elastic. And she would answer right back, and I'd be like, why are you up? She said, why are you up?
True,
And we're both
true.
trying to fill our
Yeah,
businesses by ourselves, you know?
right.
So that part was interesting. It actually was amazing because selling elastic let me pay my rent for those first 2 or 3 months before anybody was able to secure those PPP loans and so forth. And so selling that elastic really saved my business. And I feel like my sanity because it just kept me very busy.
Oh, I'm
Um,
loving the story. I think
you
I'm gonna
know,
cry. Oh,
I wished, here's the sad part for me is like I wanted to give it all away. Because people were using them for
yeah.
masks, and I just wanted to give it away. And whenever I would say that to a customer or something, they would be like, no, no, no. We want to buy it from you because we want you to stay in business. Without that, I might have given it all away. But I'm glad
Wow.
I listened to them because they were so happy to pay for the elastic. And these were people where they were donating, they had the ability to pay for it, it wasn't hurting them to pay for it, and they felt happy to be making masks and to be helping me as well. So that was really, really great. um, when I actually started teaching very quickly, it was surprising to me, but by June of 2020, I had customers that were emailing me and saying, can I come to your studio and sew? Like they were desperate. And so I was like, well, I guess we could, make that work with all the protocols. And,
Right.
there were masks and sanitizing and social and the
I bet it
distance.
meant so much to
And,
everybody to be able to.
yeah. So I actually started teaching fairly soon, which again was like such a great relief, and I felt fine about it, and the people who came were fine with it. I just made sure everybody felt comfortable, and certainly wasn't something they had to do. If they wanted to,
Yeah.
they could. Um and then also I remember a few months in, like seeing my friends who are pattern designers who were much younger than me, you know, teaching virtually. And I would just sit here at my computer and cry. Like I'd be happy that they were doing this, but I would cry because I would think there is no way in the world that I will ever be able to teach virtually. I can't imagine it. I don't know about this technology, and I don't think I would enjoy it. Well, you know what? That all changed too. And I just did it gradually. My very first customer was an 83-year-old woman who was living in an assisted living in Minneapolis. And she emailed and said, could we FaceTime? Could you help me? And I said, we can do that, but I'm not going to charge you because I have no idea if this is going to work. That kind of started it. We still keep in touch, which is nice.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, we kept each other company during the shutdown, which was great. But it all kind of evolved to the point now where I have a recording studio. I work with 6 cameras to do any of my virtual teaching,
Wow.
and I've got great lighting and microphones. I'm actually at home today, so you're not seeing the studio, but um it's a great thing. I had just like this extra room at my studio that was just kind of collecting overflow of everything, and it has turned out to be an amazing resource for me. I've got it set up great. So there are actually 6 different learning stations. Everything is HD cameras. It's wonderful because I think that people who watch my classes, they can see everything probably even better than if they were doing an
It's
in-person
true. I
class.
felt that way because
Yeah,
in the pandemic, we started offering Zoom classes on pattern review, which we had classes before, but we never did live. And then because we invited other teachers also, it was all about making, and I started taking some classes outside of pattern review as well for not necessarily just garment sewing, but I learned
right.
embroidery, I learned a little bit of quilting. It was so fun because I was able to see those stitches up close,
Yeah,
and it was great instead of huddling around the instructor at the expos and everything, which I've done before.
yes.
This is more fun. And, we found connections. So I bet it must be the same for you and your students.
It is. It's been, I don't think I would want it to be the only way I teach. I mean, if it had to be, that would be fine too. But I like having the combination of doing virtual classes and then also being able to, uh, do in person as well. I really think it's fun. Um, so that I knew I was in trouble. With the virtual teaching and setting up the studio, and I actually collaborated with Katrina Walker, and she already had a studio set up, and I said, can you help me like figure out what I need and what I should do? And so we spent a couple of hours together on Zoom, and she was showing me stuff that she had in her studio and what she was using and what was working for her. And then I started doing research and, placed this enormous order on Amazon and a couple of other companies. And I found myself like the minute I hit, you know, send order, I couldn't wait for everything to come. And then when it came, I was like, my heart was beating fast. I was like, I can't wait to set all this up. And then I was like, oh, I never knew I was a techie person like that. I mean, I guess I was, but I never thought of it that way. And now I just love it. And I'm just like so into all the cameras and the wires and the cords and the holders and, the lighting and everything else that I can do.
What a story. You are such an inspiration, Pamela.
Oh, thank
I
you.
hope all of you guys listening are as inspired by Pamela as I am. So, my next question to you is if someone's, let's say, new to your patterns, I mean, I know you've talked about the perfect t-shirt, but if somebody wants to go beyond the t-shirt, which pattern would they first pick of yours?
So I did if you would like to if you like detail sewing and fitting and um something that's not, a t-shirt only takes an hour or two to make. If you're looking for something more in depth, I worked for 2 years on my all things jeans pattern, and it
Ooh,
has been amazing. I couldn't be more excited about it. At this point now, there have been so many people who have made it, and they are absolutely loving the pattern. And the reason it took me 2 hours or two
two
years to
years.
to do is because I really wanted the fit to be a certain way. I really wanted it to be something that people could fit easier and put all of my ideas. And of course, over 2 years' time, what I thought was going to work in the beginning turned out to be completely different than what I ended up with. But the detail sewing is so much fun, all the top stitching and the threads and testing out your stitches and the everything about it is just so much fun. I love detail sewing, and it's not what I do all the time, but oh my gosh, it's so much fun. And that pattern is probably the biggest um it has more to it than any other pattern I've ever done as well. So that it has, instead of my usual, couple page booklet on the instructions, this one is almost like a booklet. And it also has a full length video. So it shows everything from start to finish, so that you've got a really good comprehensive written and video, um, that you can watch, and it's been so much fun. I wish, I know jeans is never going to be my biggest selling pattern, probably because people might feel intimidated, or like, why would I want to make jeans or whatever. But I wish everybody could make a pair, because they just the whole process of it and
I
seeing it
agree.
all
I
come
made jeans
together,
a
fun.
very long time ago, but it's just such an exciting and satisfying project.
Yeah.
You don't have to whip those out like you would a
No.
t-shirt or a skirt, but it's just, I don't know, it's a different kind of a high. And um, you know, plus jeans which fit you and all of the top stitching. I completely agree with you. It is a
Yeah.
very rewarding process. So if you're ready to take your sewing skills to the next level, now you have no excuse. I know there are many jeans patterns out there, but if you want to give Pamela's patterns a try, maybe pick the t-shirt and then the jeans to go with the t-shirt,
Yeah.
with the t-shirt, right?
Yes,
Um,
and I teach the classes in person too, so you can
True,
always
which
contact me about that too.
right, and I might be one of your students soon, so we'll see. We'll
I
see.
would love
We'll see
that.
about that. I'm like trying to jumpstart my sewing mojo, which has taken a hit since the pandemic. But now I'm up at a point at which I actually need the clothes because things have changed and the styles have changed, and so I will be sure to give it a try.
Oh, thank you.
So, I want to talk a little bit about something besides sewing. Do you have any other interests other than sewing? And tell us.
Yeah, so I would say the first thing that would come to my mind is that, because I love to sew, I also sewing is construction, right? It's really
It
just
pretty much is.
constructing
Yeah.
things. So, um, I've always been interested in construction. It's been a part of of our family and everything, but I never really had the opportunity to do it, until I joined, a group of people that do missions work in Appalachia. This will be my, I think, 14th year, and we work in the poorest counties in the United States with the Appalachian Service Project. So these are counties that have, the people that we work for oftentimes don't have running water or electricity, or you know, even a floor that they can walk on safely. So we make homes warmer, safer, and drier for these people that live in these areas. It's if you think of the map, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia, where they all come together.
So you
There's
do
like
like woodworking, you do home construction,
It's
or
it's
pretty much everything.
repairing homes. It's
Repairing
repairing
homes.
homes. So a lot of roofing, a lot of
Wow.
flooring, a lot of foundation work, because that's what happens is that roofs get damaged. They don't have, roofs are expensive. They don't have money to, repair a roof. And then what happens when the roof collapses, then your floors collapse, then your foundation
Right,
collapses.
right, right, right. It
So we
all
do a lot of that. There's also a lot of, wheelchair ramps, because a lot of people have, handicaps, disabilities, that they need to have wheelchair ramps. So, every summer I'm down in Appalachia, and I am actually, while I'm there, I'm a roofing consultant. I would never be a
wow.
roofing consultant here, but I am down there. And so I really love construction, and I love being a part of the missions groups. It's like a teen-based group that goes. So we're taking teenagers, and I love teenagers. So I like being
Different
around
kind of
them.
energy, right? And it's
Yeah,
great that you're mentoring them.
their ideas and their thoughts I'm always very interested in. And I'm very happy that this year my oldest granddaughter is going with me. She's finally old enough to go, so that's exciting. I also I'm a bit of a true crime junkie. So I'm always listening to true crime on podcasts. And I wish I could say I'm listening to sewing podcasts, but I'm listening to true crime
Hey,
podcasts.
why not?
You're always just trying to figure it out. And I feel like the more I mention it, the more women I find out that really like it. And I feel like in the future, that more women are going to be in the
In true crime.
in that field of figuring out these things. And
Well, I
so
think because inherently, aren't we problem solvers?
yes, we
Yeah.
are. And it's been
From
men
fitting to true
dominated for,
crime.
yeah, it now it needs to be the women figuring this out because they're going to figure stuff out for sure.
Yeah.
And I also like music and theater a lot too.
Wow, wow. You're multifaceted. This has been such a fun afternoon, late morning chatting with you. And I'm going to end with one last question, which is probably my one of my favorite questions I ask everyone is tell us about a ritual or a habit or a tip which has made a huge impact in your personal life. Something which um, you just like is your own and just anything.
Oh my goodness. You did write that down for me to think about, and for some reason,
It doesn't have to be like life altering. Maybe
yeah,
it's something like my husband just started making his bed just recently, and
uh-huh.
he's like, "Oh, it makes me so happy." And it could be something simple. It doesn't have to be earth shattering.
I'm an extremely excuse me, I'm an extremely organized person. And I don't seem to be able to get much done unless everything around me is in its place and is neat and tidy. Um, and so that funny meme that goes around every now and then about the it was the manual for the Singer sewing machine back in like the 40s, like, you should have your makeup on and your dishes done before you sit down to sew, and your house should be
Oh my
tidy.
God.
That's me.
Oh my God. That is not me. Although, oh gosh, that's
It's
you.
crazy. So yeah, I that is probably the thing that makes me happiest, is to have everything in place, and then I can think clearly. And then the other kind of interesting one is, because it seems like it's sort of the opposite. In order for me to get anything completed and to be at my most creative, I need to have a deadline.
Oh,
So,
deadlines. Awesome. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
So deadlines and staying organized are two things which are important to you. I will say that whenever I am sewing something, even if I'm not done with it, for me, I need to put things back. I need to put the
yeah,
pattern on the cutting table, put the tools away, or if I'm going to be using them next time, for me, that needs to be that and my kitchen are the two most organized areas in my home as well.
yeah,
And because our sewing has so many notions and things and knickknacks, and so it's nice to have a place. Now, for me, because I share my studio with my daughter who likes to paint,
oh, nice.
oh, it is
Oh,
so nice to have her in the same room. I will say,
yeah.
however, everything is chaos because an artist's mind works really differently. Um, the floor's covered with paint splotches, and I don't want to, um,
Squelch
hinder
that,
her
right?
process.
Yeah.
So it's such a contrast between her and me, and somehow she's able to find everything in this mess. So she and I are very different, and I am grateful for that because I'm learning from her how she works. And yeah, so it's been such a pleasure chatting with you, Pamela. And we are going to be celebrating your patterns all week long. For those of you who are watching, if you've sewn with Pamela's patterns, the way you can celebrate with us is write a review and pattern review. If you're new to our patterns, you can try a pattern. ask a question, take a class with her. I'll include all the links below. And thank you for listening and thank you for being with us today. Happy
And thank you
selling.
so much for having me. This has been wonderful. I
Thank,
appreciate it.
thank you, Pamela.